In our expressions and equations unit, we're going to be using, we're going to be multiplying numbers and variables together. And when we're doing that, we need to know the other ways that we can write multiplication. So, for example, you are used to seeing 3 times 5, and then we would equal 15. But that's not the only way that we can write 3 times 5, okay? Another way that we can write 3 times 5 is with just a little dot in the middle. Okay, this also means 3 times 5 equals 15. Okay, another way to write 3 times 5 would be to put the 5 in parentheses. When a number is right next to parentheses, it also means multiplication. So 3 times 5 is 15. Okay? A similar way to that would be if you put both numbers in parentheses. Okay? When two parentheses are right next to each other, that also means multiplication. Okay, so 3 times 5 is 15. Okay? The second way we're going to see it is if we're multiplying a number times a variable. Okay? So how do we know when we're multiplying a number times a variable? Well, this is a classic example of why we don't use the x for multiplication anymore. So if we want to multiply 3 times x, that looks kind of funny because it looks like it's 3 multiplied, or 3 times, okay? We don't really know that this is 3 times x. So how do we change that? Well, we can write 3 times x, okay, with the dot in the middle. Or we can write 3 with x in parentheses. We could put them both in parentheses again, okay, like we did earlier with our previous example. Or the most common way that you'll see it is just with the 3 and the x next to each other. So this, when a number is right next to a variable, okay, this means multiplication. Okay, why does that mean multiplication? Because if we were to give x a value again, so let's say x equals 4. Okay, well if we plug x in for 4 and we just put the 4 right next to the x, that looks like 34. Or if we put the 4 right next to the 3, that just looks like 34. So when we plug a number in, we have to put it in parentheses. Okay, well if we put that in parentheses, the 3 is right next to the parentheses. That means what? It means multiplication. So we're going to multiply those and we would get 12. So those are all the different ways that you can write multiplication. This one is going to be very critical for you that you remember that, but all of them will be a way that you see it on your practice and maybe on your scrimmages and games. So why don't we use the x anymore? Just to review. Well, the reason we don't use the x anymore for multiplication when we're when we're going through the expressions and equations unit is because the x looks like the multiplication sign. So we're not sure what this means. Is it 3xx? Is it 3 times x? So that's why there's other ways to write multiplication.